Hi everybody, I'm Chris and welcome to Board on the Floor. Today I wanted to go through and talk about all of the games that I've added to my collection this week. Well, it wasn't just this week, it's probably more like 2 to 3 weeks worth. The majority of them were purchased from the used message boards. I constantly save different items that I see that are interesting to me, and then I usually read up on them. Some of course I have on my wish list. This game has been on my list for a while and I found a used copy for very cheap, and so I picked it up just last week. And that is Lucidity. Lucidity is kind of a dice chucker, and I would say it's a co-op game, though there is a point when you actually can become a nightmare, and then it's you against the dreamers. In the solo mode, you go up against one of the nightmares. And each of them have different kind of hunt tracks, and depending on which one you select, it could modify the gameplay. But it's a lot of fun, there's tons of dice in here, and the games are short. And so I wanted to get one of these small box games where it was gonna be kind of like quick to the table and quick to play. And when I picked it up, I managed to play I think 2 or 3 games in an hour. I found it very addictive and it felt very rewarding. And the rules were really straightforward and it wasn't so complicated that I had to keep going back to the rule book. I pretty much just took it out, started playing it, and that was that. And I really enjoyed it. So I'm really glad that this is part of my collection now and it's gonna stay in my collection. The next game I want to talk about is another kind of small box game, Under Falling Skies. This is my first pure solo game. You could actually only play it as one player. Kind of is an alien invasion game. It's similar to Space Invaders, if you remember that Atari game from back in the day. It's this long board where you have dice, you roll them, and you place your dice strategically in each column, and that determines how much your Space Invaders kind of go down. Depending on where you place your die, there's different rooms that they go in, and you could get energy, you could attack the spaceships, there's certain places they could land and then you could attack them. And there's also rooms where you could do research. And the point is to actually raise your research token all the way up the track to the top. And if you get to the top, that's how you win. If the mothership gets down to the bottom, that's how you lose. You could also lose if they attack you so many times that all of your energy goes down. What's really interesting about Falling Skies is you have the basic game in there, but there's also a huge campaign that comes in this box. So for a small box, you have a lot of gameplay in there and a lot of replayability. And someone told me at a certain point, you actually get to play as Montreal. On to the bigger box games. And here we have Lobotomy. So I ended up finding someone online who was selling 3 games, all for quite cheap. And so I decided to drive an hour outside of town to pick up these 3 games. And this was the first one, Lobotomy. This is actually a Kickstarter edition of this game, and the person who sold it to me wasn't too sure how they managed to get the Kickstarter edition because I think they bought it retail. But who knows, it's got extra doors, it's got extra characters, and it also came with an expansion, which I'll show you in a second. But Lobotomy is kind of a co-op scenario-based dungeon crawler. So you wake up in a psychiatric hospital and you're seeing visions and you're not too sure what's going on, but you gotta try and escape. Let me show you the expansion from the deep. So in the expansion, you actually have a Dagon statue. It's Lovecraft based, so you could play Lovecraft, but who cares about that? But you do get a nice Dagon statue and some Deep One figures. So more minifigures for me to paint down the road. Oh, my nose is totally itchy. An awful lot of coffee. The second game I picked up from the same person is Village Attacks. I've seen this game listed for $300, but that's because there were tons of add-ons that you could buy during the Kickstarter campaign. This is just the basic core box. It is a castle defense co-op game, horror themed, so something I'm very into. And what's interesting about this is in this game you actually play the monsters that are defending their castle, and it's the villagers who are coming in to try and destroy the castle and destroy you. Same thing as with Lobotomy, tons of minis, tons more things that I have to paint down the road. I'm really into the horror theme, so Village Attacks, Lobotomy, totally up my alley. Even Lucidity, very horror theme based, and then Under Falling Skies, sci-fi. The last game I picked up, you may already be able to tell because you can see the little expansion right there, but it is Conan. This was a Kickstarter game again. A lot of the games I ended up picking up from this one guy were all Kickstarter games, but this is the retail version, and so it's just the basic game. But the thing about Conan is it's a 2 to 5 player game. There is no solo mode in this box. For solo play, there's something called the Monolith Sourcebook, but the thing about that as well is the only way to play those scenarios is if you had gotten the King's Pledge during the Kickstarter, because in the King's Pledge, specific map tiles came with the game. Those map tiles are available, but purchasing them separately is probably more expensive than this. I actually went online to a board game forum and posted the 3 games I'd bought and asked, oh, which one should I start first? And someone was like,
Conan isn't for solo play.
But somebody else responded and said,
well, you know what? I know that there are some solo campaigns available because I wrote them.
And that was a guy named Matt John. And Matt John ended up linking in that post to a scenario that was available for free and that could be played with this core box, and so I'm going to be checking that out in the next few weeks. I actually didn't pay enough attention to this when I picked it up, that it was a 2 to 5 player game, because I had read about that source book. I didn't know though that you needed the King's Pledge, so sometimes you got to read the small print. Oh, and Conan also came with this expansion. It just has some additional minifigs and some character cards. On Father's Day, because this is my favorite game, my wife Lee and my daughters picked up Season 2 of Cthulhu Death May Die. Season 2 just adds additional episodes. It's got other investigators as well as tons of minifigs for the bad guys. I have not actually made my way through all of the scenarios because I keep replaying some of them because I like them so much. So it's exciting to now have almost all of the expansions. I have this, I have Yog Sothoth, and I think I'm missing the Black Goat of the Woods, and of course the Unspeakable box, which was only available through Kickstarter. So maybe one of these days I might find a used version of the Unspeakable box for a reasonable price. I saw someone selling it for $200 and I'm not spending that much money on that. I was extremely happy to have this added to my collection, and I'm very grateful to my family for getting it to me. Now, this last game was kind of an impulse buy. I had been reading about it, and it's kind of an exclusive item to get your hands on right now, and the guy was selling it for a good price. I thought I would pick it up, and that is Oath. It's actually on my table downstairs. That's why I'm up here doing this video today. I've actually done a what's in the box, so you'll be able to see exactly what's in here. It's really been doing my head in to try and understand exactly how it works. The ideas in the game are not so complex, but the way they all relate to one another, it takes a lot to grasp them all. And so it looks like this is actually a 10 plus game, which I find shocking. This is a 10 plus game. All the other games I have here are 14 plus games. And this is so complicated, I don't even think a 43-year-old can figure it out. If you're looking at this box and you notice the illustrations seem familiar, well, it is the same company behind Root, Vast, Fort. It's a beautiful game, and when you see it on the table, it's super impressive. Like, the components are really nice. The illustrations are amazing. What they were trying to accomplish with this game was something really unique. The word legacy, what it usually means in board games, is it's kind of like a campaign that you could play through, but as you go through it, you may be getting components and modifying them depending on the choices you've made. So usually when you make your way through a legacy game, you actually can't go back to the beginning and play it again. But with Oath, what they actually mean with the word legacy is they want you to actually create this history within the game. So if a certain character wins the game, this time when you're playing it, next time that person will become what's known as the Chancellor. And the choices that that person has made when they won will affect the next game. And it'll keep moving forward like that. So they want you to kind of commit to moving forward and maybe telling stories as you play it about what you did previously. And depending on if you're playing with the same people, they could continue the storyline. But if you're playing with new people, well, you could actually tell them exactly what happened last time and why the world you're now going to be playing in is the way that it is. You know, I don't think this is going to be a game for everybody. I don't even know if it's going to be a game for me, but it is a game that you should probably pay attention to just kind of see the possibilities in this hobby. It's really cool the direction that some of these developers are going. It's like ridiculously hot today, and so I'm actually sweating, but it's like 40 degrees Celsius outside. These are all the games that I added to my collection in the last little while. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Once again, 7. It's the same number as the last video I made. That seems to be my threshold. So some things I have coming up, I want to do a gameplay of Under Falling Skies and start to take a look at that campaign. I haven't cracked into that just yet. I've only played the game a few times, and I must say it is quite challenging. I've played probably a handful of times and lost probably a handful of times. Lucidity, I find, is actually really fun, and that's pretty straightforward, and so I've managed to actually win a couple times with that. Right now, my shelf of shame is actually quite small. I only have Conan, Lobotomy, Village Attacks on it. Oath is on my table, so it's made its way off the shelf and onto the table, so it doesn't count. Though I guess I haven't really broken into the Death May Die Season 2 yet. But I mean, I have played the first game, so does it count with expansions? I don't know. Either way, thanks again for hanging out, and I'll see you next time. Take it easy.